Just remind you to switch off your mobile phones as they may interfere with the recording system, and also to declare any interest, financial or otherwise, as we move through today's business. And can you also ensure that your tablet device is switched, the sound switched off, and to do this is function F8. Okay, we've received an apology from Mr. Washing. He may or may not be here, but he wants an apology registered just in case he doesn't need it. Are members aware of any other apologies? No. Okay, we move then to the draft minutes of our meeting of the 12th of June. They're at page 5, and they accurately reflect that meeting. Members content with the minutes? Hello? Yes, thank you.
We were just discussing whether we were content or not.
Right, apologies?
We were just discussing whether we were content or not.
Whether you're okay. Well, I assume then you are. Thank you. Move then to our first item of business, which is our committee inquiry briefing from the East Belfast Partnership. Just refer you to the Works memo, including a list of organisations who have provided written evidence at page 9. The briefing paper from East Belfast Partnership is at page 18. Their strategy, the East Belfast Art Strategy, is at page 21, and an annex to this strategy at page 38. And we will welcome Roger Courtney, who is Eastside Arts and East Belfast Partnership, to our meeting. Roger, you're very welcome. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And if you'd like to make an opening statement, and then members will follow up with some questions.
I'd be delighted. First of all, apologies from Maurice Kincaid, who's the Chief Executive of East Belfast Partnership. He's just come back from the United States and is about to go off somewhere else, so unfortunately wasn't able to come this morning. Because I think it's more useful to have a kind of conversation, a dialogue about this, I'll jump the usual 10 minutes to explain to you why East Belfast Partnership is wonderful and tell you the other 147 things that we do. Just to share, in a sense, a bit of a journey. A couple of years ago, East Belfast Partnership decided that the arts is an important tool for kind of regeneration of an area, and decided to initiate a festival, and so ran with a big headline 2 years ago, lost lots of money, did a second festival last year which was a bit lower key in order to make sure they didn't lose lots of money, and they decided after that it was time to take another look at how you develop arts in an area. So I was approached by the partnership to have a look at that. One of the really interesting things in the brief was a description of East Belfast as a cultural desert. So I had the great job of going around and interviewing artists and promoters and venues and community groups and all kinds of people about the arts in East Belfast. And one of the fascinating things was there's a huge amount of interest and lots of creative people in East Belfast. And suddenly all kinds of things I didn't realise. So you talk to people about writers, they'd say, well, you realise, of course, that C.S. Lewis, George Birmingham, Forrest Reed, Sam Thompson, Stuart Parker, John Boyd, dozens and dozens of great writers in the past were all from East Belfast. All three of the One Belfast ones, One City, One Book novelists were all East Belfast. It doesn't matter if you look at kind of music or you look at visual arts, or there's a huge amount of kind of creativity. And so the whole idea, and it relates to this kind of idea, there's a kind of general idea that kind of Protestant working class communities aren't really interested in the arts and culture. And there's sophisticated versions of the theory. John Dunlop's book, and I admire John a lot, called Precarious Belonging, he's talking about the kind of culture, Protestant culture in Northern Ireland. He says, you know, we're really good at shipbuilding and engineering and business and things like that, but we're no good at kind of writing poetry and fiction. And it's a complete load of nonsense. Absolutely, all the evidence absolutely refutes that. So the trouble is, people buy into that and kind of think it belongs to a different community from them, and it's not true. So part of the strategy has to be celebrating actually the richness of of culture and creativity that's, in this case, is in East Belfast. So I've developed a strategy for the arts in East Belfast. There's a number of different elements to that. One is there's been huge developments in terms of venues in Belfast. Fantastic developments in terms, and you've met some of them, and you're going to meet some of the others. It's brilliant, and that's really, really to your credit. And I think it's really taking off. The problem in East Belfast is a lot of people in working class East Belfast will not cross the bridge, and therefore they do not access venues that are not in East Belfast. And that's a shame, but it's the truth. And so the involvement in the arts is considerably lower than, it's about a third of the average in working class communities in East Belfast. So one of the issues we've been looking at is the issue about venues. So you'll be aware that there are proposals to transform Strand Cinema, which once they opened the multi-screen in Dundonald and in Odyssey, it was always going to be difficult to maintain the Strand purely as a cinema. So we're involved in helping them transition to a non-profit arts centre. And this will be coming back to you at various points, I'm sure, because obviously there's some resource kind of requirements to do that. Second issue is there's a huge amount of development work needs to happen. There's lots of people that I talk to, and they're involved, really, really interested in arts things, want to do things, but when you talk to them about, have you set up a non-profit organisations, or, have you applied for grants, they go, oh, how do you do that? And I was like, everybody knows how to. No, they don't. And actually, there's a whole lot of support work, working with grassroots groups about how you develop from just a little kind of small group of volunteers interested in the arts to creating something that's really viable. The other thing which is kind of fortuitous, which has happened, is the announcement of the closure of Orangeville School resulted in an approach from Van Morrison to say he was interested in doing something in relation to his old school. So you have a school where, probably more than 50,000 kind of working class young people have been over the years. And we started to talk to people about Orangeville School and realised a whole range of really, really creative people came out of Orangeville, not just Van Morrison or Eric Bell, but poets like Gerald Daw, Brian Keenan, Sam McCready, loads of people. Mary Jones went to the girls' school. So we're kind of using it as a vehicle to get lots of people in East Belfast to come back to their old school and experience a kind of arts that they would never otherwise experience. So that's where we're planning that for August. That's an interesting kind of process. Just want to say a couple of things about the brief that you have in terms of accessing the arts. One of the things I was thinking is it's the wrong question. It kind of feels like you're asking the arts are over here and working class people are over here. And it's interesting talking to lots of people who are over here. Actually, they're really interested and involved in the arts, but they need lots and lots of support. So it's not just how to get them to go over there, it's how to build their capacity to engage in the arts and do what they actually want to do. And that's one of the really interesting things about the pioneering kind of principle of Orangeville School. He really, really cared about the arts. He said, this is a really, really powerful tool for developing young people and working with every young person to maximise their creativity. And so as a result of what he did, a huge number of people have been able to kind of express that creativity. The other couple of things is actually the research is very clear about some of the things you need to do to increase access for the arts from working class communities. This is not one of those really, really difficult problems to solve. We know which art forms, if you want to invest in art forms that working class people are more likely to go to, you invest in circus, you invest in carnival, you invest in community festivals. The recent Belfast Community Festival Fund had £70,000. They got applications of £700,000 and therefore turned down the vast majority of people who applied. In that sense, they had no choice. So there's certain kinds of things you need to invest in, the things that you're likely to get a kind of working class audience. It's not, you have the research. about that. The second thing is in terms of theatre. There's been incredible transformation in theatre writing over 30 years. Before then, the idea you would have kind of working class writers writing lots of plays was complete, until really you got, I mean, that's why one of the things why Sam Thompson's Over the Bridge is kind of iconic, because it was the start of that. You now have a whole string of incredible writers. I went on Tuesday night to see David Ireland. A few weeks ago I went to see Gary Mitchell, Bobby Niblock, from before, obviously people like Graham Reid, and you have Owen McCafferty and Mary Jones, and incredible range of local writers writing in our context. That's brilliant. There's still a real problem about even who's going to put that on, and you've had one or two examples of theatres working with local community groups to create something that really reflects, like the Crimea Square in the Shankill, for example. And we need a whole range of that so people can really engage in theatre. It's hard to get, Protestant male actors, for example. There needs to be real investment in the development of that. And the third element, I think, is supporting the building of capacity from the ground up. I talk to people in various kind of community centres in East Belfast who really, really want to do things. Some of them have done things. So, Wandsworth partnered with the Beat Carnival, for example, really, really exciting initiative. And eventually they couldn't maintain the funding in the end, so that kind of partnership kind of ended. So there's a real decision about making investment in that kind of community arts participation from the ground up, as opposed to simply saying to bigger arts organisations, well, you should do some outreach. It needs to start at the bottom up, in my view. So my conclusion in the end was, actually, I don't think the real issue is about, we know what we need to do. The question is what you're going to stop doing in order to fund that, or how you're going to persuade the Finance Minister that, actually, you know what, the arts is one of the most important things you can invest in for the future of Northern Ireland.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Interested in your own background, the fact that you were involved in youth and community work, but also that you eventually set up, or what became, the Crescent Arts Centre.
Yeah.
Could you maybe chat to us about that?
Well, I was very young then. I had no idea what I was doing. But I was talking to Peter McLaughlin, who was, I can't remember where he was working then, but he was saying there's all these kind of youth and community groups, and they go away and kind of these kind of community relations holidays, and they come back to Belfast, and there's no real kind of shared space. So the old Victoria College School was empty, and I remember because he says, you know where my office is? I don't want to see you, and walked off. And I didn't know how to. And so I went and got the keys for this derelict school with 52 classrooms, and I had no idea what I was doing, but I kind of, my starting point was where there are local community groups or local youth groups who might be interested in using it. And so very quickly we developed initially one youth club and then two youth clubs from the kind of from the Holy Land and then from Sandy Row. But what I wasn't quite expecting was immediately people became aware of what I was doing. I got dozens and dozens of arts organisations saying we really, really need some space to work, to develop. And so within 6 months, I went and visited various community arts centres elsewhere because I realised this was going to have a major arts focus on it. So I could tell you that I thought that at the beginning, and I didn't. It emerged. But the interesting thing was then having a combination of all those arts organisations and these two working class youth clubs, which eventually kind of worked in together. Okay. It was a really kind of interesting and unusual kind of way of working. But
now you're focused obviously on the Strand Theatre.
That's one of the strands, yeah.
And is that something which you see sort of a model that's used in Crescent Arts being used within Strand?
There are different kind of models, and I don't want to say that I'm not dictating that it should be like the Crescent. And the Crescent's model is mostly around participative workshops, which I think are great. There's obviously physical issues. You've got what was an old cinema with 4 then screens. So it's trying to get a balance between performance spaces. So you've got screens, but for a theatre company, it doesn't have wings and it doesn't have changing rooms. And it doesn't have the kind of facilities you could use for a theatre. So there's a whole lot of work to try and hopefully maintain at least 2 key performance spaces. One bigger, one smaller, and then the rest of it would also then be used for a range of kind of more participative stuff. So it needs to be a kind of mixture of models, I think. There's no space really for visual arts, I don't think so.
And where are you with regards to a business plan or Strand?
There is just being finalised as we speak is the business plan for the Strand, so they will be coming to talk to you about that as a separate company has now been established. They have a business plan, so the next stage they need to kind of go to looking at a kind of an economic appraisal, which will be the next step after the business plan. So they'll be coming to talk to you about that.
Okay.
I have no doubt.
And just regard with the art strategy, which we have in front of us, how will this work sort of on an ongoing basis? Then link up with other groups doing similar work across Belfast.
Yeah, that's interesting. I actually think it's really, really important. And so one of the first things I did was went and talked to a range of other people who are running festivals. Because I think it is not healthy simply to say we're our little area and we're not going to do anything with anybody else. So we've been talking to people like the Festival at Queen's or the Fela and Fobal or other festivals that look at ways of sharing things. So we're doing something and we have something we share with them and they come and share things with us. So we create an outward-looking East Belfast, not simply an inward-looking one.
Okay. One of the concerns that we've heard during this inquiry is that you have arts organisations coming into areas and building up an expectation, and because of limited funding or whatever, money comes to an end, so they then leave, and then they leave in a vacuum.
Yes.
I mean, how would you try to attempt to make sure that didn't happen within East Belfast?
But this is a much wider issue because the whole issue about how you create sustainable funding. You know, there's a small number of particular organisations who are the much bigger ones, and much bigger, have sustainable multi-annual funding, so they've got a kind of security that they're there over a long period. But the vast majority of funding comes in short bursts, and you're getting it from the lottery fund, and it's for short periods, and so it's an issue. I mean, it's definitely something to have a look at. I mean, I was advised, even looking at Eastside Arts, it's not even worth looking at the multi-annual funding at this moment because there's no space. It's a fixed amount of money. There's already all those bigger organisations in it, so there's no space for anybody new. But you know, there's scope for shorter-term kind of funding from the lottery. But that's obviously very difficult when you're trying to create some sustainability. And that's us looking at the whole of East Belfast. You know, it's obviously really, really difficult for little small groups running a community centre to do it. So you're right to identify that as an important issue.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bradley?
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Roger. It was a very animated presentation, and you're obviously very passionate about your work, and it was great to see that. You said that the initial festival was maybe a bit overambitious. So what lessons did you learn from that? Well, spend less money was one.
Well, the trouble with spending less money is you put on a less exciting festival. So, you know, I went to talk to the Fela, and they had £250,000 they were spending on the festival. Last year, the partnership spent as little as possible. So you're talking about a few tens of thousands of pounds. Well, the lesson from the first one was don't take big financial risks. Don't agree that you're taking the risk for a very large artist that you're not absolutely sure that you've got the audience. But to be absolutely fair to the partnership, I had no background in running festivals or arts events, so to say, you know, they've got 25 years to catch up in West Belfast, so that they learned some things from the first year, they learned about the second year. Well, if you don't have some exciting things and names that people will recognise, it's hard to get an audience. So one of the key issues is about building an audience. And the Strand, for example, is interesting because it's actually a huge number of people went to the Strand in East Belfast. Everybody went to the Strand as a child to the Strand, but a cinema audience is not necessarily an arts audience. So, but actually, you've got a whole lot of people from kind of local communities used to going to the Strand, and now they need to be turned into an arts audience as well as just a film audience.
Mm-hmm. And from your experience, what type of mix makes for a good festival, especially in the early years?
What makes a good mix? I'm dealing with this very question at this very moment because we're obviously planning this arts festival in Orangefield, and what makes a good mix? See, I think there's obviously the issue about you can just say you want to get a good audience. So the fellow's got Boyzone, and I'm sure they'll get lots of people who want to go and see Boyzone. But I think it's also about something else. It's about kind of educating and inspiring people. And so part of what I'm trying to do is get a whole range of those really exciting kind of creative people from who've got an East Belfast background doing things at the festival, but doing it in a way that will be really attractive and get people. So I think there's an educational role there as well. But it's no good if you put something on that's educational and 4 people come.
How do you strike the balance between highbrow and lowbrow?
I'm not very interested in lowbrow in a sense. I don't. So I'm not. It depends what you mean by lowbrow. I mean, for example.
But some people may consider Boyzone to be lowbrow. Some others may.
That's right. I'm not putting on Boyzone.
No, yeah, but I mean, you said in your briefing document or some of the papers that you wanted the whole strategy to be inclusive of young people and not to be for adults. So how do you get that involvement?
Well, you're right. It needs to include some things that are of interest to young people. I've just realised we actually have something that's very lowbrow. We have a horror film, and I watched it the other night, and it's a horror movie called Willard. And interestingly enough, it's based on a book by an East Belfast writer, Stephen Gilbert, who was kind of mentored by Forrest Reid, and based on his book, The Ratman's Notebooks, and it's all about rats, and they take over houses. And so in one sense it's lowbrow, and the other sense, what we're actually trying to do is get people who might go to a horror movie, but actually get them interested. In fact, here was this East Belfast writer, and I've got his son to agree to come and talk before the film. So, something you can consider as lowbrow, but it's all about building people's idea that creativity is for everybody. It's not just about some special people, it's about you.
So when the festival is finished, when it's over for the season or the period that it's on, what would you like it to leave behind it?
Well, actually the strategy, 95% of the strategy is nothing to do with the festival, and the festival is kind of fortuitous. So I'm not a big fan of doing a festival and then doing nothing. And so one of the conclusions of the strategy is there's a whole lot of developmental work that needs to happen on the ground. So the whole idea is when the festival is over, there will be a whole round of discussions with local groups about things that they would like to develop locally. A lot more work with some of those groups that Michelle talked about outside of East Belfast to come in to East Belfast and develop things, put on things. And actually, I'm talking to some people to actually move into and be based in East Belfast. So I think there's a whole lot, but that developmental work needs to happen in a way. It's kind of slightly sidetracked by the festival for a couple of months, and then actually move on to the real arts development work.
But should the festival to some extent be a showcase for all of the activities that take place in the area in the 12 months leading up to it, as well as other?
Yeah, you need to do once they do the development work. Absolutely, you're right. So if they do a festival next year, what we've done this year, in a sense, is highlight. Here's a whole range of really incredible, exciting artists and stuff, all which have emerged from East Belfast. But next year, you're right. Absolutely. Those things that are happening during the year should be a key part of the festival next year. So you've got a whole mixture of locally developed things and things, big stars. And
Okay. Thanks very much, Roger.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Hilditch?
Thanks, Sharon, and thanks, Roger, for your presentation. Very welcome.
Thank you.
I spent a lot of time at East Belfast in younger days and through work commitments, to be honest, more than anything, so I got to know a wee bit around it, and sometimes it sort of disappoints you now driving through it when you see some of maybe the dereliction and various things in certain areas. But it always struck me as a potential in certain parts of the inner part of East Belfast to try and create some sort of community arts hub as such, and the likes of the pop-up idea of, where it can overcome dereliction and things like that for short periods of time and can engage with community. Has that ever really taken off to any degree, or there's things like the big telly projects and stuff like that? So, has that ever worked, or maybe it hasn't been tried yet? Or
I don't think it's been tried. I think there's a whole lot of ideas out there of things to try, and if people have talked about kind of pop-up things, and I'd like to see a whole range of things developing. I think
it's sort of centred in a hub area to start with, like a small couple of streets or something. Or
yes, I mean, I think there are a number of kind of hotspots where there's real potential to do something, and you know, there's kind of emerging kind of venues where you can start to say there's a group of things from kind of Skegness round to the East Belfast kind of network centres around there, and kind of inner, and then slightly further out around the Strand. There are a number of initiatives, so I think there will be kind of some kind of hub areas where a whole lot of creative things will develop.
Okay. One of the biggest events that sort of engages the communities is Cultural Night in Belfast, I suppose. Cultural Night in Belfast?
Culture Night,
yeah.
yes.
In around September time.
Yeah.
You were saying that people from East Belfast don't tend to cross the bridges as such to come into this. Would there be an opportunity to sort of piggyback in the back of that and create something?
Yeah, no, we're in discussions with Culture Night. I think Culture Night's a good example where it started being the Cathedral Quarter,
yeah,
and has expanded and expanded, and it just, if any of you experience Culture Night, just creates a real kind of buzz and a kind of a feeling of kind of creativity and kind of innovation that I think is great. And definitely, I think when it comes to September, it's important that East Belfast plays a bigger role in that. So
yeah, no, good to see that.
Yeah, I agree.
And finally, you mentioned the festival. I know Dominic had asked you questions about it. There was the first one which I attended, and it was sort of biggie. Well, it obviously didn't work out too well, perhaps, the last one was smaller in your review on the situation, but it is going ahead again. Is the future of it secure?
Well, what is happening this year is we will be doing a festival in August, which part of it will be based in Arnsfield School,
right,
and part of it will be based in Strand Arts Centre. So there will be a festival this year. Yeah.
Right. Did you find, was it centred out around the Hollywood Road before?
Last year, basically last year, the organisers approached anybody who had a possible venue and said,
right,
is there anything you fancy putting on?
Right.
And they encouraged the venues to take the risk on the events.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Humphrey.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you very much for the presentation. Can I start off by saying, you asked about the question that we put, and you said you don't believe it's the right question. And actually, someone asked that question last week in Coleraine, and the reason the question is phrased the way it is as much as it's possible to be a catch-all in terms of those of us who represent urban constituencies and also people who represent rural constituencies. But there are a considerable number of people, a lot of them in what are called working class communities, who are detached from the arts. That's the reason why the question. I heard you talking about, when you were talking about East Belfast, right, you talked about a strategy for East Belfast in relation to the arts. What does that look like?
The arts strategy for East Belfast?
You were talking about, you had a strategy in East Belfast about connecting working class communities, I think you were talking about, to the arts.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I've outlined some of the kind of key elements. It's available. It was sent to the committee. So it has a series of key elements. So the redevelopment of the Strand is a key element of that. The development of other venues in East Belfast is part of that. Doing a lot of kind of community arts work on the ground is kind of part of that. There's a series of anniversaries next year of key kind of creative people from East Belfast, so using those as a vehicle to celebrate and also remind people, because actually if you did a vox pop in the street on the Neward Road and said what creative people come out of East Belfast, they probably would run out after Van Morrison and C.S. Lewis.
Yes, that's the point. You see,
So it's
'cause
really
you named a lot of people there. Some of whom I would have known were from East Belfast, but I'm not from East Belfast. But if they were from the Woodvale, I would have known they were from the Woodvale. But the thing about it is, I mean, in a sense, that sort of typifies the problem, I think, because you said people don't cross the bridge, to go, I presume, to the venues that are in the city centre, and the point that I've raised in the past is it also applies. I mean, I represent North Belfast. It applies to lots of people in North Belfast as well. So, why do they not go across the bridge, in your view?
It's a much wider kind of question that.
That's why we're having this inquiry.
But it's not. Yeah, when I say wider, it's not only about the arts. Mm-hmm. There is a sense of anxiety about going outside, and we're not talking about everybody in East Belfast. We're talking about particularly the disadvantaged areas, which are closest probably to the bridge, find it most difficult to kind of contemplate going to any kind of things which are over the bridge.
Yeah, but why?
I have no idea. There's a sense of you're comfortable in an area that you feel is your own, and a sense it's a very Northern Ireland thing, that you therefore feel uncomfortable and potentially under threat being in an area that is not your own.
Okay. In that context, and I'm not disagreeing with you, I just wanted to tease out why that was the case. In that context, isn't it the case then that the institutions need to go perhaps to them and reach out into the community?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's a really important. That's why I've been talking to people in a range of arts venues and promoters and things outside of East Belfast to say, come and talk to us. And before they said, well, we weren't quite sure who would we talk to. So part of the strategy is creating a small infrastructure, which is a kind of not to run things as such, actually to be a kind of animators. We'll go and talk and say, let's make something happen together.
I mean, you mentioned Film Phobal and also New Lodge Arts is another very successful arts group. Building, creativity, capacity building, and confidence building are hugely important, particularly in deprived areas and disaffected areas. So I was interested in your comment as someone who was a former chairman of the Development Committee in the City Hall, and I always bang this drum. You talked about multi-annual funding and the fact that there are a small group of organisations that are in there all the time. How do those smaller groups or new groups get in to get a share of the cake? Because I think that's a huge issue.
And I mean, I don't have an answer to that, because it's an issue, an important issue for the Arts Council, and only if you've been a funder do you realise how difficult it is to give away money and to do it that everybody doesn't criticise you. And I think it's really, really difficult how they organise that issue. A lot of the things that are under multi-annual funding, I think, are wonderful things, and I'm very keen on continue to be supported. So I'm not criticising the things that are currently getting multi-annual funding. There just needs to be, if this is a developing kind of agenda, there needs to be some ways that people can become part of that agenda.
Yes, and I agree entirely. But the problem is whether it's Arts Council or Belfast City Council, who we've been critical of, and at times around this issue. The point I'm making is that capacity building and that confidence building cannot happen if the funding goes to the same groups every year. It cannot be as widespread and have the impact it needs or should have in the communities that we're talking about across this city if that doesn't happen. I
agree. That's why I said the difficult thing is not to know, it's not about what you do. It's if you had a discussion today on who you're going to stop funding, if it's a fixed amount of money, is a very, very difficult.
But if you have the capacity and you have people who are there full time and employed to do it year in, year out, and you're a new kid in the block and you don't have any of that, then you can't do it. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Ms McCorley.
Myra Caherly, thank you, Chair, and thanks for the presentation. It's very interesting to hear all that. It's very much an East Belfast experience that you're talking about. I mean, East Belfast is predominantly a unionist area, but with the experience of say the Short Strand, which would be a small nationalist working class area, would that compare with what the unionist area experiences?
In terms of not going to yes,
Division?
it's very, very similar.
Okay.
Yes.
And do you work with that community? Is there cross-community engagement?
There is cross-community engagement, and there were some difficulties about 2 years ago. It's a general question about kind of cross-community engagements. Actually, the arts, and actually one of the cross-community arts initiatives has been one of the best kind of processes for enabling people to do build cross-community understanding. So I think that's a really important part of the strategy, is to support that.
Okay, so you're saying then that the cultural arts route has had a benefit in terms of sort of maybe closing the gap between communities?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, okay, that's good. The other very positive aspect about East Belfast that it has a growing Irish language community. Do you think that's important in terms of cultural development?
Well, it's interesting. I'm speaking very personally here. In a sense, there has been a sense that Irish language is owned by one particular community in Northern Ireland. And actually, in another life, I've been working on looking at the whole tradition, kind of dissenting tradition, and a lot of the pioneers of the Irish language were actually, Presbyterians. And so, getting away from the idea it's a kind of political thing, I think is my personal view is that it's important. And so, it's interesting that Linda Irvine, in particular, has been kind of leading on kind of doing some enabling that kind of change to take place in East Belfast. I think it's really good.
I mean, I totally agree with you, because I think it's one of those falsehoods that has just developed over years, because the history will tell you that the development of the Irish language and the revival has come from the Presbyterian tradition, and it's really good to see people taking ownership of the language, because I firmly believe the language is for everybody, and I think it can be a way that can bring communities together. So it's good. So do you actually work with Linda Irvine's group as part of is that in your strategy?
Well, it doesn't mention her group in particular. It talks about working with. She's based in Skegness, so it talks about working with Skegness and also working with kind of other community groups in Short Strand.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks very much for that.
Mr McMullen.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I too enjoyed it. I'm looking at your presentation, your notes here, and you do mention there about the more affluent people in East Belfast. Where did all that come from? And how was that acquired? Did you just
What's your question?
Ballyhackamore, places they got there whose income was over 25,000, tended to go into centre of Belfast or South Belfast rather than East Belfast. What relevance has that got to do with East Belfast?
I'm lost, I'm sorry.
I read your report.
Yeah.
Read your report.
You're talking about the strategy itself?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Read your report and you'll see what I'm talking about. I can't see the relevance in that there.
It talks about the levels of attendance in different wards in Belfast. Mm-hmm. So if you take East Belfast, so you've got in inner East Belfast, you've got about a third of the average attendance arts events in inner city East Belfast. Mm-hmm. But if you go to the outer ring East Belfast, you've got actually much better attendance than the average for Belfast. And that's probably not entirely different from if you look at the whole ring around Belfast.
Is there anything you can do to change that? do you know what you're doing wrong that you can't entice them in? These ABC ones?
So the ABC ones are going to things. People who actually they're further away from the bridge, but they're much happier to cross the bridge. So that's not an issue. And actually, for arts organisations, it's important to have that audience as well, because you know they're the ones who have income, so they can pay for things. So it's finding a way of having something which is broad enough to attract both audiences.
Yes.
The difficulty is not getting the ABC ones. The difficulty is getting the.
Have you had any conversations with West Belfast or Fela?
Yes.
And is there,
I was at their
is
lunch on Thursday.
Is there an ongoing togetherness there and helping?
Yes, no, we're currently talking about events to put on in each other's festivals at this very moment.
Very good. The last thing is, quite a lot of the report and what I've heard today is centred around funding. You know, if funding doesn't come in and etc., how does groups get funding and other groups don't get funding? Would you agree that there is groups out there who really, when they're interested in the arts, etc., they will go for it, and whether it's funding there or not? That's how a lot of groups started up in other parts of the country when there wasn't much funding there, but they were really interested in the arts.
I agree. I'm not at all a believer in things being funding led.
Yes.
I don't think it's about, and the trouble is when there is funding, then you're right, other people will jump on the bandwagon and who can write very good, sophisticated kind of funding applications. So I think it's one of the challenges for you about how you create a resource that will actually be accessed by groups who are working kind of from the bottom up.
Yes.
And I think that's a really important thing. But you're right, the initiative, the what people want to do needs to come from the ground up, not the other way around.
Because, you know, there's one thing there that talk about Belfast Council, they funded, is it 70,000 they have or something, I think it's in the report here somewhere, for the arts, for funding for groups.
That was for the community festivals fund.
Community festivals. And there was a lot more.
500,000.
500,000. Does that mean that those that didn't get go away? Or what's the evidence of how many of those have actually stayed and went ahead with what they had? But
I have no idea. It'd be an interesting work, but you know, all of us who are involved in the arts, you know, you do not depend on one particular source. You spend a lot of your life, far too much of your life, scrabbling about to find bits and pieces of money from different funders. So you might go to City Council and you'll go to the Arts Council and you might go to some of the other lottery funds, and then you might try, we'll do a bit of community relations things, so we're Community Relations Council, here's one or two charitable foundations, we'll try them, and you spend lots of time filling in application forms, and that's the reality of the arts, and it's a difficult arena.
Do you see the arts progress in East Belfast over and above this culture of looking for funding?
Well, I think funding tends to follow the commitment to want to make something happen. I do lots of funding workshops, and I say to groups, you know, the groups that are successful, the ones who are doggedly determined to make something happen, you know, and are prepared to come and talk to you and, you know, get their politicians in support, and they really, really want to make something happen and will do what it requires and go through all the hoops that it needs to go through, and it's difficult and it's frustrating. And so I was talking to a group the other day, and you know, they said after 12 years they'd managed to get something, and you know, if at the beginning somebody had told them it was going to take 12 years, they would know it. They assumed 18 months' time we'll have this thing up and running. But it's the world of the arts.
And the last thing, Chair, the community festivals, it'd be interesting to see how many of those applications were actually community festivals to do with the arts and that there. You know, community festivals is slightly different from arts, because you could have a community festival centred around anything as a community. You could have street parties, you know, or all that, but that's not the arts. And I think that's a bit of a red herring in there. In a way, it's given a false impression of what maybe is going on. But there is a rich arts vein running through East Belfast.
But if you look at the range of really, really exciting arts festivals, you know, £70,000 is nothing.
No.
Fela had $250,000 last year.
The Fela started off with
I appreciate it. They started
Don't forget
very
the trainers,
small. I
where they
agree.
started off from, without keep saying they got a half quarter
I know.
million. They started off on a baseline of nothing.
I agree.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm following on from an earlier question from Mr McMullen, just with regard to the challenges and setting aside funding as a key challenge, which may be difficult, but you have an implementation plan, the first phase of that, which is timescaled until March 2015.
Yeah.
Are you on track with that? And what are the challenges that you have or you faced, or perhaps those challenges which were unanticipated?
First of all, both DCAL and the Minister and the Arts Council have been really, really supportive and really, really helpful. And without the support, we wouldn't have got to the point that we are. Some of the challenges are just trying to get into the right kind of funding processes. So we're planning a festival. We don't yet have any commitment of funding now. So it's really, really difficult to programme a festival without any commitment to any funding. And that's a major challenge, but it's not a criticism. There are, in terms of the time scales that these things work on and when deadlines are things, it's just, there's certain times of the year difficult to do things because, if you want a tourist grant, for example, if you're running something in the third week in October, it's really, really difficult because the deadline for the tourist grants is once a year in the middle of October. So you have a year cycle.
Okay, but taking aside the funding issue,
Okay.
you obviously you've a number of targets with regards to engagement, and I suppose really encouraging people to get involved in the arts who maybe didn't see that as something that they may have been interested in at all. But what challenges have you had with discussions across the piece?
Actually, those discussions have been incredibly powerful. I just realised that after a while of talking to various people, actually what this needs is a lot more of these discussions. And once you start to talk to people, they all have ideas of things that they want to do. And then the conversation goes, well, how do we make this happen? And so actually there haven't been challenges in terms of groups wanting to do things, groups saying, yeah, let's talk more about how we could do something, or groups, the festivals outside saying, how can we do something in East Belfast? We'd really, really like to do something. So those have been the easy things, and I don't think those are difficult to deliver, assuming that we have the funding to actually have people who's going to have those conversations. Okay. That's for the challenge at this moment.
Okay. Well, for example, one of your targets is about consider the feasibility of developing a community-based voluntary theatre company in East Belfast. How's something like that moving forward?
That hasn't moved forward at all. So we've had some discussion about people who say that's a really good idea. So there's a whole series of discussions need to happen to make, which you're talking about your kind of hub. Where is that going to be? It needs to engage with people who are skilled in terms of professional theatre. I think it's quite a long-term project, but I think it's a really exciting one. And people who saw the Crimea Square thing in the Shankill thought that's it's a really, really powerful concept. So there will be all kinds of hurdles is the answer once you get to the kind of next stage. So we've been talking to a group, for example, about to come and talk to you about an international children's literature centre based around the kind of C.S. Lewis. And so there's loads of hurdles. They need to go through a whole process of creating a business plan and looking then at the premises, and again you're back at economic appraisals. Every single one of these projects will have a series of hurdles attached to them, I am absolutely sure.
Yeah.
But a lot of people need quite a lot of support to guide them. I mean, that whole process of business planning and feasibility studies and economic appraisals is a very difficult and very specialist skill.
Okay, and taking that theme of children, you've mentioned in your presentation to us, and obviously members are more than aware that the children are naturally creative, and I suppose really if we want to develop them in any sphere, be it in education, so on, that early intervention is the most important thing, and it's really sort of having those close relationships then with schools and that appreciation of the arts. You have mentioned that you are looking to set up partnerships with the varieties of primary schools in the area and post-primary schools. How, again, is that in progressing?
Not much. At this moment we're organising the festival, and so we've had some initial discussion with some teachers who are kind of keen on the idea, but it won't be until September until that really will kind of start to really go to the next stage.
Thank you very much for your presentation and for taking time this morning to discuss the work that you're doing. Well, we look forward to getting more information with regards to Strand. It's going to be an exciting project. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for asking me. I really appreciate it. Nice to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to let you know, members, that the camera's now filming. It's not broadcasting live, but it is filming, so that little wobble in technology has been rectified. Just with regard to comments which were made around that, this is a really interesting project, and there are a number of strands to it. And it was very positive with regards to the involvement of the Minister and the Arts Council, but we would members be content that we maybe write to the department just to get an update from them as to what their role is and their involvement in the partnership.
Involvement is one thing, Chair, but it takes money to buy whiskey, and he said they got none.
I'm sorry?
I said involvement is one thing, but it takes money to buy whiskey, and from what I heard, he said they got no money. So.
Yeah, so if members are content, then that we write to the Minister just with regards to the work of the partnership, and if there is likely to be any commitment in the near future.
Maybe we should get the partnership here.
I'm sorry?
Maybe we should get the partnership here.
That is the representative from the partnership.
Right.
Okay, members, then moving on to our next item, which is again with regards to our inquiry. We have a representatives from the MAC. Can I just refer you to Clark's memo at page 96, a revised PowerPoint slide presentation and a letter from the Director of the Cathedral Quarter Trust, which is tabled in your pack. The MAC's response to Martin Lynch's presentation is at page 125, and the MAC's written submission to the inquiry is at page 133. And I welcome Anne McReynolds, the Chief Executive, Leonard Hagan, the Chairman, and Kieran McQuillan, the Learning and Participation Officer. You're all very welcome to committee this morning. I'm not sure who wants to lead, whether it be Lem or Anne.
Thank you, Chair, and thank the committee for inviting the MAC to engage with the inquiry. We fully recognise the importance of the work, and we look forward to sharing some of our experiences with you. The MAC has been involved in the broadest possible cross-section of Northern Ireland population since we opened just 2 years ago. The Chief Executive, Anne McReynolds, will do half the presentation, and Kieran McQuillan, on my left, who is our Learning and Participation Officer with special responsibility for youth and communities, will address the other half. The presentation will last for about 20 minutes. We'll give you a short history of the MAC, update you with some of the examples that we have in terms of reaching out to communities, give you a short snapshot of a typical week in the MAC, and finally we share some ideas going forward that we might have and some recommendations. But at its core, the MAC is an outstanding building in the centre of Belfast in which life-enhancing art is created and enjoyed by individuals and communities. And we are obviously today focusing on the community cohesion part of it. I think it's also important to note that the MAC plays a very vital role in inward investment and in tourism. For Belfast to be a very vibrant city and to be taken seriously by the inward investors that we're trying to attract. And they primarily are trying to bring young people in to work in their offices, and they audit the quality of life in a city. We're having some very interesting discussions with our new City Quays development, my Belfast Harbour hat on. And one of the things they talk about is it's the restaurants, it's the art offering, and the MAC it's young, it's vibrant, it's in the digital era, so it kind of links into the age group of the people who will be working in the new industries, and 20% of those will be people coming from overseas. So it's kind of important that infrastructure is there. Secondly, in relation to tourism, clearly we changed the dial in relation to tourism in Belfast with Titanic Belfast, and that really has driven tremendous tourist traffic into Belfast. We want them to stay, and for them to stay, we have to have a complete arts, culture, restaurant, entertainment section. And the arts, the MAC plays a very vital role in that. We work in partnership with the Tourist Board. The Andy Warhol exhibition was an international exhibition and financed with the Tourist Board. We have a number of joint projects with them, including the MAC International, which is an international Turner-type prize. So that's some of the stuff that's kind of important in the wider context, but we're here really to talk about our community cohesion part, and I would like to pass over to Anne McReynolds.
Thanks, Len, and I'd like to add my thanks to Len's for this opportunity to tell you a little bit more about the MAC and the work we're doing. The first slide is an opportunity just to give you some headline figures in terms of the MAC's performance to date since we opened 2 years ago in April 2012. Since then, we have welcomed over 690,000 visitors to the venue and presented over 1,000 live performances and 20 art exhibitions. We've done this with the help and commitment of 100 active MACtivist volunteers, and in so doing, we've won 7 local, national and international awards. We've worked with 46,380 participants in our community and outreach programmes, including 50% of the 20 primary schools and 75% of the 20 post-primary schools with the highest percentage of free school meals. The MAC is estimated to have contributed £10 million to the local economy, and the fact that we've sold more than 70,000 cups of coffee since opening shows that we're busy from morning to night, 7 days a week. Involving as many people as possible from as many different backgrounds and positively impacting on their lives is critically important to us in the MAC. We take seriously the fact that too many people in Northern Ireland think that the arts aren't for them. Our artistic programmes and learning and participation projects in schools and communities with young people and families have been designed directly to appeal to the broadest possible audience while always striving to be excellent. Moving on to the next slide. We wanted to show that we are dedicated to the idea that the enjoyment of, participation in and creation of art is everyone's right, regardless of economic, geographic or physical challenges. And because of this commitment and belief, we have invested heavily in a wide-ranging schools programme throughout Northern Ireland, because extensive research shows that early engagement in the arts can make all the difference in the development of an individual's understanding of and appreciation for the arts. This map shows our level of engagement with schools across Northern Ireland. This is what we have achieved in just 2 years through the work done by Claire Lawler, our Learning and Participation Officer with special responsibilities for schools and communities and families. Claire visits on average 7 schools each week, every week throughout Northern Ireland to explain to teachers how the MAC can help them in the delivery of the curriculum and to encourage schools to take part in our activities, most of which are delivered to them at no cost. The MAC activities, these kinds of activities with schools include gallery tours, building tours, Northern Ireland-wide primary school competitions, creative workshops and the upcoming Great Writing competition to commemorate the Great War, and the free resource packs we publish for teachers which help them understand and interpret almost every performance we stage and every visual art exhibition we present. One example of the practical ways in which we remove the barriers to participation is evident in our Passport to the MAC scheme, which we developed directly in response to feedback we received from teachers. They told us that the price of theatre tickets was prohibitive, so we reduced the price of the tickets and introduced a special schools rate. Then the teachers explained that the price of transport was also a major impediment to large numbers of their pupils taking part in the MAC's programme. So we fundraised and gained sponsorship from one of our key corporate supporters, the Ulster Bank, who, along with Arts and Business, funded a special subsidised transport scheme that has brought 2,816 school children from all over Northern Ireland to the MAC, who otherwise would not have been able to attend. And some of those children came from as far away as Strabane, Armagh and Dundrum. And just to reiterate, in all our schools' work, we target primary and post-primary schools with higher than average numbers of pupils who are entitled to free school meals. But even before children go to school, we want them to feel at home in the MAC, in our specially designed family room, where they can enjoy our free weekly storytelling sessions or take part in an art workshop. Our commitment to delivering services for pre-school children has been so successful that the MAC has been voted the best venue in Northern Ireland by NetMums users. NetMums is the UK's fastest growing online parenting organisation with over 1.7 million members and 8 million unique users each month. Moving on from schools, there are a number of ways in which ordinary people from a broad range of backgrounds enjoy the MAC, either through our theatre programme, by visiting one of our free exhibitions, or simply enjoying lunch or a meeting in the shared space we have created in Belfast city centre. This slide demonstrates that despite the fact that the MAC is a brand new venue, we have managed in 2 years to attract audiences from throughout Northern Ireland, with the densest location of ticket buyers coming from Antrim, Down and Armagh. This is particularly pleasing to us because before we opened, our research showed that we could reasonably expect audience members to drive up to 45 minutes to the venue. And this slide illustrates that there's an audience base for the MAC that extends far beyond that 45-minute drive time. I'm going to hand over to Kieran now, and as Len said, he's our Learning and Participation Officer with special responsibility for youth and communities. And Kieran's going to share with you a few examples of the kinds of ways in which we're working with a number of different communities.
Since opening, the MAC has been fully committed to engaging working class communities directly and having the broadest range of people using the MAC on a daily basis. We've been extremely proactive in involving local communities in our work and indeed supporting them in their own development. The very first community project was Sounds of the City, a music and heritage project which reflected the histories of the communities located directly around the MAC. Participants from Sailortown, New Lodge and Day Street worked closely with us over 6 months to create soundscapes and songs which reflected the rich history and character of the areas supported by the docks and shipyard. The resulting interactive exhibition and events involved 1,500 participants and were seen by over 3,000 audience members, including hundreds of local people from the participating communities, Sailortown, New Lodge and Day Street. This level of quality, depth of engagement and exposure to public audience is testament to the value we place on the work we create with communities. Other examples of this are Common Ground, a community garden project which involved 20 young people from Tigers Bay and New Lodge, Maccord, a multicultural music project involving Arts Acta, Clockmore Male Voice Choir and Bosco Youth Club, both from Newry, and Cranmore Integrated Primary School. The Amal Project, a visual art exhibition created by female refugees and asylum seekers in partnership with Mediation NI, and Belfast Rocks, a cross-community drama project involving teenagers from Springmartin, Highfield and Clonard, jointly delivered with the Belfast Interface Project. Our annual MAID Festival in October each year is a unique event where we hand over the building to our Den Collective Youth Group, who themselves programme a week of arts performances, exhibitions and workshops for the 14 to 18 age group. The Den Collective contact and book the artists themselves. They provide the brief for our design and marketing around the festival and are active involving young people in the MAID Festival. The Den Collective is a fantastic group of 12 young people, mainly from North Belfast, from a range of backgrounds, who meet weekly in the MAC and put a huge amount of effort into programming a fun, eclectic and ever-growing festival. To date, over 2,500 young people have attended over 80 MAID events. Groups that have involved their young people in MAID in previous years include Upper Springfield Development Trust, Action for Children, Blackie Community Centre, Duncairn Community Centre, Tigers Bay, Lower Ormer Road Action Group, Northern Ireland Council for Refugees, Belfast Education and Library Board, Larne YMCA, the East Street Community Centre, Taurus Jack and North Belfast Bites. Plans are well advanced for mid-2014, and the festival has established itself as one of the key events in our autumn programme. One of our most successful exhibitions was Andy Warhol at the Mac. This was the first time the work of Andy Warhol, arguably one of the most famous artists in the world, had ever been shown in Northern Ireland. We programmed the exhibition because we knew it would be of interest to people who normally don't go to art galleries. There is no question that among the 100,000 people who came to see the exhibition, there were large numbers of people who were not regular arts attenders. This exhibition was a huge coup because it meant that people who could not afford to travel to London or Paris to see the work of an artist of the calibre of Andy Warhol could come into our free galleries and see this world-class art in Belfast. Independent research showed that the Warhol exhibition alone generated 1.5 million return to the local economy. That was one exhibition. We have curated 20 since opening. The next slide demonstrates the nature of the relationships we are building with working class participants, using the example of our work with the Now project. Now provides training and employment and volunteer support services for people from deprived areas of Greater Belfast. Their youth service members have been using the MAC for approximately 8 months and now meet every morning in the venue. For their young members, many of whom have learning difficulties, MAC represents a safe and welcoming place for them to meet, work and to access the city centre. Over a number of months, we worked with young people to develop a drama piece which was aimed at building their skills and confidence. They performed their work in May in our upstairs theatre to an audience of friends and family. And the Now staff were truly amazed that these vulnerable and marginalised young people performed with such courage and confidence. We are currently planning the development of this partnership to better integrate the MAC's arts provision with Now's training programme and establish clear paths to employment for their members. In terms of removing the boundaries to participation for all disabled people, our provision goes well beyond our statutory responsibilities. Naturally, the building is designed to the highest standard in terms of physical accessibility for our customers, artists and staff. We regularly programme interpreted performances and talks for people with hearing and visual impairments, and guide and hearing dogs are welcome in our theatres and galleries. But we have gone further by being one of the first venues in Northern Ireland to programme relaxed performances in our theatres, which are specifically designed to welcome people with learning disability, Down syndrome, autism spectrum condition, or sensory and communication disorders. During our relaxed performances, there is a stress-free attitude to noise and movement among the audience, and some small changes are made to the light and sound effects to minimise the potential upset for customers who may be disturbed or frightened by loud noises, flashing lights, or dark places. We have extended our commitment to full accessibility by developing projects in tandem with people with mental health needs and learning and physical disabilities. We have developed an access charter which aims to help us do all possible to meet the particular needs of our customers, whatever those needs may be. We offer touch tours and Twitter tours, and we have 3 team members who are MAC Disability Champions who help us make sure we meet the high standards we have set ourselves on this issue. March this year saw the launch of a photography exhibition created by a group of men from traditionally separate communities in North Belfast who have been affected by suicide. Created in partnership with Lighthouse, a suicide prevention charity, the men worked with professional photographer Kelly Morris to create original photography on the theme of hope. The men involved not only found the artistic process hugely beneficial to their mental health, but have also been amazed that their work has been valued and given a public space by the MAC. The men, many of whom are from the Tigers Bay area, have become frequent visitors to the MAC, independent of any outreach programme. They regularly buy tickets to performances, attending talks and workshops, come to visual art exhibition openings, or simply meet friends in the MAC's cafe. All of us who work with the Lighthouse gained as much from working with them as they did working with us, and we hope to be able to continue the MAC's relationship with this great group of men. Similarly, our work with Belfast Education and Library Board, Equality and Diversity Unit has been long-standing and fruitful. Since January this year, the group of multi-ethnic and multi-ability young people from across the city have been meeting every Wednesday night in our dedicated community space, The Den. From their work, we developed the idea of a day in which we could encourage a large number of young people to engage around the idea of identity. This became ID 2014. For ID 2014, we involved 120 students from specially targeted schools across Belfast in a day of discussion and creativity around the subject of identity. Wellington College, St Joseph's, St Dominic's, Malone College, Our Lady of Mercy College, Ashfield Boys, Girls Model and College de Furstia, 6 of which rank in the top 20 of the Free School Meal Index, questioned a diverse panel chaired by William Crawley, which included politicians, musicians and sports people from Northern Ireland, talking about their personal views on their own identity. Workshops with drama and visual artists and musician Brian Kennedy give students an opportunity to creatively explore their own sense of self. Broadcaster William Crawley said, "There are few more important questions for our society than those we explored together at ID 2014. And in many ways, this event modelled a way forward for Northern Ireland by creating a safe and open space for learning about ourselves and each other." The event received incredibly positive feedback from schools and students and cemented the idea that the MAC is a neutral place in which to discuss important and sensitive topics. Planning is already underway for ID 2015, and we predict that this event will grow year on year. I'd now like to come back to Anne.
I'd like to thank you for your attention. I appreciate that we've been talking to you for quite a while, but we're nearly finished. The end is in sight. We wanted to tell you about a typical week in the MAC, and you'll see from these 2 slides that there's a lot to talk about, but you'll also be glad to know that I'm not going to take you through absolutely everything. But it is a typical week. It was the week beginning the 2nd of June, which was 2 weeks ago. And alongside our 2 visual art exhibitions and 17 theatre performances, which were attended by the general public, including groups from the East Belfast Mission, the Ballinafi Community Development Association, and Mediation NI's Ethnic Women's Group. Our family room was open all week, as always, and our homework club continued to attract students who were revising for exams. We also ran an early years art workshop, the Den Collective's weekly meeting, a planning day to progress the young people's planning for the Maid Festival for 14 to 18-year-olds. The Now Project ran a training event. The Spring Martin Youth Group took part in a drama workshop. The Falls Road Suicide Prevention Group had a gallery tour. We hosted a community arts discussion group and also welcomed the Clonard Woodvale Young Women's Drama Group, as well as a BELB Ethnic Diversity and Quality workshop. And that is a typical week in the MAC. While this was going on inside the venue, Claire Lawler, our Learning and Participation Officer with special responsibility for schools and families, was outside. She was out visiting Cliftonville Integrated Primary School, Donegal Pass Primary School, Edenbrook Primary, Glenwood Primary and St Patrick's Primary School. And as we've said, she averages 7 school visits every week. And there are arts and parts in Northern Ireland where Claire is known as the lady from the MAC. Looking ahead to the next few weeks, we'll be working with cross-community groups from Spring Martin, Highfield and Clonard. We'll be presenting a drama performance together at the start of July. We'll be delivering summer activities for young people with caring responsibilities in partnership with Action for Children, which will take part in August. We're planning workshops in visual art with Men's Shed, an organisation in North Belfast which addresses isolation in men over 55. We're planning a cross-community exhibition of work with Community Dialogue's North Belfast-based Ashling project, and we're awaiting a funding decision on a collaborative project with the Spectrum Centre to deliver workshops with participants from the Greater Shankill area in the autumn. We're working with our Den Collective to programme the Maid Young People's Festival, and we're engaging with schools throughout our passport scheme to provide low-cost access to our Christmas show. I hope you found what we've told you today informative. But before we conclude, I want to offer you some thoughts and recommendations on how we should move forward from here. I just wanted to take a minute to note that this presentation has not mentioned the activity that is core to everything we do in the MAC, and that is the art that is created and enjoyed there. The fact is that our starting point is always concerned with finding ways to support the creation of outstanding visual art, theatre, dance and music by Northern Ireland's artists. It is only after having achieved this central mission that we can create the kind of participatory projects we've talked to you about today. For example, the men who took part in the Lighthouse project responded first and foremost to the work of the professional contemporary artists we had curated as part of our Mystery of Tears exhibition. ID 2014 was such a huge success because we had real live musicians, poets and artists on stage talking to the young participants about what it is to be an artist in 2014. In the absence of support for Northern Ireland's living, breathing artists, there will be nothing to hang community engagement and learning and participation work on. The MAC was funded by DCAL, the Arts Council, DSD Laganside and Belfast City Council, the private sector and various other funders to be a centre of artistic excellence that would positively change people's lives, and we take that responsibility very seriously. We don't mean only some people of a certain income bracket, from a certain part of Belfast or Northern Ireland, or people of a certain skin tone or a certain religious background. We mean everybody. And I hope you can see evidence of that commitment in some of the examples we've chosen to talk about today. I'm now pleased to hand back over to Len, who's going to share with you some thoughts in terms of how we might move forward.
Thank you, Anne. Just a couple of thoughts that the committee might consider. Unlocking creativity was a really interesting policy initiative. I think in about 2002, it was an ambitious cross-departmental approach which outlined a coordinated strategy for the development of the full creativity and cultural resources of the people of Northern Ireland, by linking new approaches to education and cultural development. And I think it's still a document that stands the test of time, and it still is an excellent document in terms of what we're all trying to do. We see the Together Building a United Community strategy as a significant opportunity for change, particularly in terms of ideas around connecting the young people, and especially those who are in danger of being left out. And we look forward to further policy developments and participating with our arts colleagues in how we can drive that agenda forward. One specific example that might be worth looking at, and that's the Jukes Theatre in Lancaster. It has developed a means of better integrating the arts into service provision for marginalised people. And the Lancaster local authorities has actually entered into service level agreements with the Jukes and a number of other community organisations, meaning that the Jukes works with young people directly, referred to them from the community, placing art services on the same level as health, education and social statutory providers. We think it's a very interesting model and something that might be relevant to Northern Ireland. This links with our final thoughts, which is really in considering how to most effectively address inequalities in cultural participation, the committee considered the adoption of a broader, more needs-based approach to include the kind of groups that we actually deal with in the MAC, such as young people with learning difficulties, people with physical difficulties, people with mental health needs, refugees, asylum seekers and ethnic minorities. I'd like to thank you very much for your attention. I hope that was not too long, and we really welcome your questions. Thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you very much, and can I thank you for your very detailed submission, both in oral evidence and written evidence as well. Obviously, the MAC has been the focus of press interest in recent weeks as a result of this inquiry, and I know that we have received a paper responding to comments which were made. Is there not a lesson in this maybe for the MAC as well, in that you need to tell what you do and the excellent work that you're actually doing within the venue?
I think, Chair, you're absolutely right, and that is a lesson that came out of the last couple of weeks, that there is so much going on that we probably don't communicate it as well as we might. I suppose with just sort of 2 years under our belt, maybe that's, and we're kind of developing so many programmes, we have not the resources into communicating what's happening in the MAC, and I think it would help as well to attract more people to it. I think that's a very good point.
Okay, and if it goes some way to help you, we've received quite a number of emails and letters in support of the work that the MAC is actually doing.
Thank you.
I suppose that's why we were so delighted to accept this opportunity. In the MAC, we fall foul of the fact that we're so committed to what we're doing and so interested in doing good work in as broad a context as possible, that we tend to do the work rather than talk about having done the work. And because the MAC is a 7-day-a-week, year-round venue that closes only 1 day a year, it can be difficult to find the time to do that. But I think you're absolutely right. I think we need to try and find ways in which we shout about the great successes we have had so far.
I think one of the barriers to that is we are often working with very vulnerable people who, so for example, young people with learning difficulties or people who are asylum seekers or refugees who don't necessarily want their pictures in the paper or their names in the press, and we maybe need to find better ways of publicising those kinds of projects in a sensitive way. I think some of the coverage we have had of our learning participation projects have been down to the bravery of the participants involved. The men from Lighthouse were very brave in saying, no, we actually really want to highlight the work that we do. And even though they were working through a suicide prevention charity and had experience of that, they wanted to shout about it. And it's great to see that.
Okay, thank you. I mean, it's been said that the MAC is elitist, but to say that arts generally is elitist is something which isn't new to any of us. How do you propose to try to break down that perception?
Yes, this is a great frustration to all of us who work in the arts, because I think you've probably got lots of proof in the course of your inquiry of the huge amount of community-based practice that is going on from within the arts sector. I can think of very few venues, theatre companies, who aren't deeply connected and embedded with a broad range of communities within which they work. In the MAC, we were very aware of that. We knew that we were going to be building a brand new arts centre in a part of the city that had never had one before, and that because of the design of the building, that it ran the risk of, because of its contemporary nature, of being a little off-putting to people. So we know that everybody who doesn't work in the arts thinks that people who work in the arts are part of a clique that they're not part of. And we really actively put measures in place to try to mitigate against that. So for instance, even though the building is, and sometimes we underestimate people, that's one thing to say. We thought that because the building is a beautiful building designed by Hackett Hall McKnight, and it has won numerous national and indeed global awards, we thought that people would be a little put off by it. In fact, the vast majority of the feedback from our customers is that they absolutely love it and that they feel proud that Belfast and Northern Ireland is sufficiently evolved to be able to create something like the MAC. But still knowing that there was a chance that people were going to be a little anxious about coming into this new venue, we put in place the Mactivist programme. That's our volunteers programme. Because we thought, what do you want when you come into somewhere? You want somebody to greet you and help you feel at home. So we put our activists in lovely bright blue T-shirts on the back of which it says, "Talk to me," and we asked them to stand at the 2 doors into the MAC and to smile at everybody who came in. And those are ordinary people just like us, who dress like us, think like us, talk like us. None of them are artists. And it was about helping break down those barriers. Another thing, the MAC isn't the kind of place where you'd ever see a red rope. We don't have places for posh people and places for the rest of us. We are a very democratic organisation, and that even went into the design of the theatres. Our 350-seat downstairs theatre space was designed to be democratic. There are no good seats or bad seats. There are no seats for the rich people and seats for the poor. It's totally democratic. But I think more than anything else, the way in which you break down misconceptions about elitism is by your actions. And I hope you've seen by this is just a snapshot of some of the work we're doing in communities. We don't have time to tell you about everything. That we are more than interested, we're deeply committed to delivering programmes across our visual art, theatre programmes, and also our learning and participation, which are relevant to ordinary people. It would be silly of us not to do so. And it is, I have to say, it's a deep regret to me that this concept of the arts organisations, art venues being elitist is still being discussed in 2014. We have worked so hard to counteract the mistaken assumptions that only a certain kind of people go to the arts. I think that's what the MAC was all about.
You know, it's incredibly important that young people get to engage in the arts as early as possible, and obviously the challenges for schools is a financial one, particularly with regards to transport. And I welcome that initiative which you had with Arts and Business and the Ulster Bank in creating a sponsorship programme in order to try to alleviate that as a problem. And obviously that has allowed you to engage then with some rural communities as well, and you highlighted Strabane as an example. But what other work are you doing with rural communities, given that you're very much Belfast-centric?
Well, I'll come back to you in a minute. It's true, the MAC is a Belfast venue, there's no denying that. It was built and funded to be such. And also it's true that there are lots of really good art centres throughout the rest of Northern Ireland. But we work in partnership with so many different constituent groups, and we're very interested in ways in which we can break down barriers, not only rural, urban barriers, but also barriers that exist within the urban centre of Belfast. I suppose that one way to answer that is that we go out all the time. I think, you know, once you give somebody a desk and a computer and a phone, as people, our natural inclination is to sit at it. Very few people in the MAC sit at desks. Our learning, we have two, I'd really like to stress that, we have 2 learning and participation officers, which given the breadth of Northern Ireland, given the breadth of our work and our commitment to try and get as many people involved as possible, you know, we could do with 22. But those 2 learning and participation officers are out in communities all the time. And Claire, it was maybe slightly unfortunate that the examples that I gave of the work that Claire, our Learning and Participation Officer with special responsibilities for schools and families, on the 2nd of June, she happened to be concentrating on Belfast schools, but every week she's out visiting 7 schools, and they're very often, more often than not, well outside Belfast. Kieran, do you want to pick that up?
Yeah, I mean, both in schools and communities, we are, you know, making real attempts to involve rural communities in the building. In the schools, our masterpiece for the MAC competition is specifically designed that it isn't based around transport and having to get to the MAC. A lot of that work happens within the school, and we've had schools as far away as Garrison and the western tip of Fermanagh involved in that process, where obviously transport is a problem. But also in the community side, we have engaged with community groups from Newry. We've had community choirs from around the Downpatrick and different areas of Antrim involved in projects within the building. So I suppose there's an automatic thing to make the connections with the communities on our doorstep, but we are looking to go beyond that more.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bradley.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Thanks very much for the presentation. It was very impressive, and congratulations on your great success to date, and I hope you will be able to get that message out far and wide in by whatever means necessary. I've been to the MAC a couple of times myself, and I went to see Summertime in it, and I was very impressed by the production. I think it was Box, and I think the play was written by somebody from Northern Ireland. All the actors were from Northern Ireland, and I know that Ryan McParlin won a nomination to the Irish Times Theatre Awards, which I was very impressed by. But certainly I'm very impressed by all of the performances and the high standard of production. And the audience was, I think, predominantly young people. I did meet a couple of well-worn theatre people there, Martin Lynch and Ian McElhinney. You've probably heard of them at some stage or other. But no, just what I wanted to ask you, with that performance using, you know, local playwright, local production group, local actors, is that part of your policy?
That's core to what the MAC is set up to do, is to really encourage Northern Ireland both playwrights and actors, and to give them the venue and the support, both financial support and mentorship to move them forward. But this really is Anne's area of expertise, so she's really the brains behind our whole theatre approach in the MAC.
It is, Alex, absolutely critical to what the MAC is there to do. As a centre of artistic excellence for Northern Ireland, it's so important that we support local artists. And before the MAC was created, our local theatre companies were sort of peripatetic. They had to travel around by necessity, and it's very difficult to build an audience base whenever people aren't really sure where you're going to be. So we have worked really closely. We don't just give them the space. We don't just give them a fee. We have co-produced and co-commissioned work with local theatre companies. We provide all sorts of ways in which and not only the established theatre companies, it's really important, just like any natural ecology, that the young guys coming up from the ground up are given some kind of help. Otherwise, people will just go to England or to Scotland, where there's a much better, much more supportive in many ways environment for young emerging artists who aren't receiving any funding to get a help. So we have a whole series of schemes. One of them is called the Hatch Scheme, where for 18 months, which is quite a long time, we invest in 5 artists who are theatre practitioners, dance practitioners, and they don't get any funding from the government. And we work with them, and we give them free space in the MAC, and we give them free support around fundraising, marketing, cultural development, the kinds of things we can do to help them and what they need. So we do that. That's an ongoing scheme. We also have our artists in residence space. So for 3 to 6 months at a time, different artists come in and they work in the MAC. And those are artists who you probably would know, Damien Gorman or Jimmy McAlevey. You know, important writers, Conor I can't remember Conor's name. He's going to kill me. Who was a fantastic composer and has been Conor Mitchell. And these are artists who, although you would know who they are and they're incredibly successful in their field, it's hard for them. They still are independent contractors who are working in a very difficult arena. They come into the MAC, we give them support, we link them in with other artists, and we work with them in a way which is it's absolutely critical that an art centre does that. Summertime is a great case in point because it was such a fantastic production and it wasn't easy theatre. You know, a commercial theatre wouldn't take summertime. It was absolutely gruelling. It was one of the best pieces of theatre I've seen created in Northern Ireland in a long time. But that's what the MAC is there to support, to take risks on the kind of work that you wouldn't get to see in the West End, for instance. But those very actors, producers, directors, lighting designers, they cut their teeth in places like the MAC. And they go on to do great things for Northern Ireland after they've received support from us.
Okay, thanks very much. What about music, song, dance, Irish language events? Are they all kept for in the MAC?
They are, and that's one of the things that we're most proud of in the MAC. We see our audience and our potential audience, and we see people as very different people. Not everybody likes the same thing. You know, just because you happen to come from one particular area of a city doesn't mean that everybody who lives in that area thinks the same way, likes the same things, has the same motivations and the same barriers to attendance. You know, there isn't a particular demographic group that likes a particular kind of play any more than they like a particular kind of book or a particular kind of music. So our entire artistic programme is based on that idea that if you're going to get lots of different people to come and see lots of different work, then you have to create lots of different opportunities. So the MAC isn't just theatre, and it's not just visual art, and it's not just dance, and it's not just music. It's not just workshops, and it's not just a place to come and have lunch. It's all of those things. So we find, and it's not just a particular kind of music. You know, we do all sorts of things, and we do fun things as well, which is something that people sometimes forget about art centres. It has been known that you can have fun in an art centre. So, for instance, around, you know, for whenever we had Warhol, we deliberately programmed Warhol, as Kieran said, because we knew that people who normally would never darken the door of an art centre would be dying to see Andy Warhol's work. But we also programmed alongside that a recreation of Studio 54 in our downstairs theatre. Studio 54 was the disco where Bianca Jacker came in for her 30th birthday on a white horse. We didn't have Beautiful Woman on a White Horse, but we did have glitter bombs, and we flew over the last surviving original DJ from Studio 54 from New York, and we had professional dancers who were on roller skates, and that play, it was thronged, absolutely thronged. We had to increase the capacity 3 times, and we could have sold the event 10 times over, and it was full of people who, if you asked them now, they very well might say, the arts aren't really for me.
Okay. You mentioned there the outreach to schools, and you had statistics and so on, and the good work being done by the education and outreach officer. What about the other, let's say, arts groups around the region, places like Strabane, Newry, Omagh, and so on? Do you have any interaction with them? Give them a platform?
We do. We have a number of sort of regional community music and theatre organisations that come and perform in the MAC, but we also then go out and work project with them. So I mentioned Cloughamore Male Voice Choir in Newry, who were involved in our MAC Chord project. We've had Antrim Community Choir and a community choir from Downpatrick involved in projects as well. It's actually a project called The Events, which actually sort of marries some of the stuff that Anne is talking about in terms of quality professional production and that community engagement, where they actually, the community choirs performed on stage as part of a production which is a Guardian 5-star rated professional show. So those kinds of interactions are really important, because not only is it a great experience for them, but it really gives back to the community in terms of and the feedback from the choir is that it really strengthens their capacity, their skills and their confidence as well. So we do engage with those kinds of community groups. And
if I went to groups and said, look, I was at a meeting today and the MAC said, you're welcome to participate and so on. I mean, what could you do with or for a group like that?
There's a few different things. We have, for those who want to just put on a show, we have a community hire rate, which makes it really accessible, really, for groups of that nature to actually use the professional standard facilities that we have there. And then we also run community screens of lots of different kinds. They can come and get a free tour of the building where they will see all the backstage areas and talk to our team. And then what I do on a weekly basis is meet with community representatives from the community arts sector, from different sort of community backgrounds, to find out about their group, tell them about the building, and then arrange where the appropriate interactions can take place. That's an ongoing process on a week-to-week basis. It's often unique to the group in terms, and that's what we try and do. We don't do off-the-shelf programs. We really talking about the needs of the group and how we can help them to address those.
Okay, thank
We're
you.
incredibly open. Sorry, Dominic, we're incredibly open. We're really, really keen to work with anyone from any part of Northern Ireland, from any background. And as Kieran says, it depends entirely on where that group is and what they want to do. But one of the ways in which we try to be as effective and as cost-effective and time-effective as possible is by working in partnership with people who are embedded within their local communities. I mean, it would be nonsense for the MAC to try to duplicate or replicate the work that is already existing. Certainly where there are neighbourhoods where there is little or no arts participation, we want to do more in terms of trying to kick-start some kind of cultural activity. But we want, and we do work in partnership all the time in order to extend the reach and the impact of our work.
I have to say, sometimes we also get it wrong. Christmas before last, Anne's idea for Christmas tree was cabbage and broccoli and other green things. So.
It was the most beautiful Christmas tree. All the young folks photographed it and tweeted it. It was a roaring success.
Take your word.
I promised him that we wouldn't have a scrap in front of the cow committee.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Irwin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for your presentation. I think it's very good and encouraged by the work that you're doing there. Perceptions are in life are a problem sometimes. There may be a perception, and some people feel that there is a middle-class ethos, and maybe the building does send out that perception itself, the very building. But is there any particular actions you have taken to encourage working class communities, in particular? I think to overcome that perception.
I'll ask Anne to, but we don't see communities as as working class, but I kind of understand the very specific point and the perception. You're right, perceptions are people realities, and
that's the problem.
It's hard to deal with it.
Thanks for the question, William. We've worked really, really hard, and when you would say working class people, I think about people who just don't feel comfortable in an arts centre, and that's a large portion of the population, and we fully appreciate that. So we have done so much, and I think one of the ways in which we're pleased that we have managed is because the figures stack up. All the data shows us, and all the empirical research we have done is telling us that we are succeeding in attracting a non-traditional, hard-to-reach set of communities. So 46,380 people have taken part, and these are real hard numbers. We count everything we do. We maybe don't tell anybody about it after we've counted, but we do count everything. In terms of our audience data, so ticketed attendance at the MAC is one of the easiest things to track. So when somebody buys a ticket to the theatre, you've got their postcode. And although postcode analysis isn't necessarily the panacea to everything, it is the only tool we all have whenever we're trying to determine breakdowns of audiences. And I mean, the evidence is absolutely irrefutable. It shows that in our top 50, we have the top 50, the people who come most regularly to see things in the MAC are from Donegal Pass, Craigie Road, Newton Ards, Belfast City Centre, the markets in Lower Ormo, Turf Lodge in Andersonstown, Cliftonville Old Park, Annadale, Balnafie, Ballyhackamore and Orangefield. That's it. Kieran, do you have something?
Just in terms of practical ways that works, in terms of, asked about audience, but also participation. You saw this week at the MAC that we're currently involved in a cross-community project. That's not just in the building. On Monday night we had an arts worker up in Spring Martin delivering a dram workshop. Last night we had groups from Highfield and Clonard in the building in a dram workshop, and they get free transport to come down here. So we really are pushing the boundaries and breaking down those barriers in terms of perceptions and indeed access to the building and work taking place in the communities.
It is sometimes, I mean, obviously, sometimes you have to take things with a pinch of salt, but it has been said to us so often in so many different ways by so many different demographic groups that they feel welcome in the MAC, that the welcome they get when they come is so overwhelming that it really puts them at their ease, that we must be doing something right. There's also the fact, in terms of trying to come up with how do you measure where somebody comes from and how they are. One of the productions we put on, in order not to be perceived as an elitist, and because we thought it was an important piece of new writing that needed to have a platform, was 50 Shades of Red, White and Blue. And I can tell you that sometimes we underestimate people's sophistication in Northern Ireland. I was in among that audience many nights, and it was entirely mixed. It was you couldn't possibly say, that's the person who came and everybody else in this audience is the same as that person. So different strokes for different folks, different programmes for different people, and different ways of engaging and talking to different people. Mixing it up and trying to be as inventive and as welcoming and as open as possible is core to what we do.
I think, to your point, we have a very impressive numbers going through the MAC. A lot of people haven't been to the MAC, and that is our biggest difficulty right now. Our marketing budget is kind of it's restricted, like all arts groups, but we've got to find a better way of getting the message out. Because once you get people in, they feel comfortable. Yeah. And if you're not in and you haven't been there, it's very easy to say, well, that's a cool place. And that is the biggest challenge we have, without a doubt.
I wish you well enough. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McMullen.
Sure. Thank you for your presentation. I really enjoyed it. Do you agree with me that the arts, I don't know how to put it, the arts family are sort of in a way authors of their own doom, because it's not the people actually going through the doors and the problem, it's themselves that seem to be doing nothing but fighting with each other. I don't see the MAC be competition with arts out there. Like, I'm not going to mention any names, but they have their role, they have their niche market. You have yours. What is all the fighting about? That's the way I look at it from a non-artistic person, not the one going through the door. You have your role to play. I've been in your building, and I must say you don't realise it's an arts venue at all when you go in, and even when you go through it. I saw the Andy Warhol exhibition. I was totally fascinated by that one. But I don't understand what all this fighting is. This thing about working class, and your place is not for working class, it's for middle class and all of that there. No, and that's the message. When that message goes out from the leaders of arts, it's giving a bad message to the schools, the communities, all of that there.
Yes. I think you're right, and it's kind of very hard to defend it because we've excellent working relationships with the opera house or whatever, because we do complement each other. It's about trying to increase what's available for people in Belfast, and I have to say that we haven't come across a lot of that, but when it becomes kind of vocal and public, it does us all a lot of damage, and it's unfortunate, and that's so what we just tried to do is to deal with it in a professional way and kind of put the facts forward. But it's
okay.
Oliver, if you wouldn't mind, it's a matter of deep personal regret to me that that's the case. I completely agree with you. Mm-hmm. I think that the arts sector, not recently, but in years gone by, did itself absolutely no favours by tearing itself apart in public around the issues that were stoked up from within the arts sector about what was community and what was professional. I thought we had moved far beyond that kind of conversation, because the truth is there is no segregation. The same artists who deliver community-based projects, you'll see them on the stage of the MAC that night. That's why they're so exhausted. They're working in communities and working professionally. And the idea that this kind of non-productive debate should be in the public domain, which is utterly at odds. We work so closely with every independent theatre company in Northern Ireland, every dance company, every venue. I could pick up the phone to any venue in Northern Ireland and have a fantastic conversation with my colleagues, and the same in the UK. The MAC, as one of my trustees said some time ago, is entirely a force for good, and we will not contribute to this utterly retrograde, unfortunately well-deserved reputation for the arts being too. And I think it might be to do with the fact that we're all very passionate about what we do.
Well, I don't know. The other thing is the creative industries and those young people going through the creative industries. Do you see your role there as being pivotal in helping young people coming through that?
Well, I'm sure. I think pivotal might. I wish it was. We could say pivotal. I think that would be overstating. But certainly, it's got a very significant role to play, because whether you are, if you're designing software, you're being creative, and the skills you need to do that are creative skills, and creative skills obviously live particularly in places like the MAC and those that kind of work in the MAC, and that's why it's important. As I was saying on my opening remarks, the whole investment into Northern Ireland and having the right climate and having young people who are coming out who will go to school and be interested in creative things is what the inward investors, because it's like, what we're having is boom in the whole film industry in Northern Ireland, software design, gaming, and those skills are completely complementary to the arts sector.
And the other thing, last thing, is that the ethnic minorities here were a very diverse community, getting more and more every year. This seems to be, I'm not going to say a haven, but an excellent place for them to show their diverse cultures, etc.
Celebrate it.
Is this growing?
Absolutely. That's what we feel very strongly. It's everyone can come in and feel comfortable and share and educate and feel that they are part of the MAC, and therefore being part of the MAC, part of wider Northern Ireland society, not excluded.
Lastly, Chair, I'm a board of governor in a school this last 15 years, and I've never saw anything come through about the MAC. it might be something you could look at, of getting it through the education boards, through the boards of governors, maybe social media, the way the young people use social media now.
Yeah.
But I would certainly, for special needs groups, which I have a great interest in, I didn't know you'd done that.
Great. Delighted to do that. We'll follow that.
Well done.
Thank you, Oliver.
Okay, thank you. Ms McCorley?
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. And thanks very much for the presentation. I have to say, I think it is really, it's great that you have such a wide range of activities and different initiatives that you have taken to provide, I suppose, as much of a variety for people as possible. I mean, I've been in the MAC several times and I've always had a great experience. They're very, very positive. So I have to say, I was quite surprised at the criticism being levelled at the MAC, because I think compared to other theatres I've been in, I mean, I love theatres, I think you really do go the extra mile to try and reach out to as many different people as possible. So have you heard that before, or were you surprised?
Yes, we were, and no, we haven't heard it before, and that's why we welcome the opportunity to come here and just put the facts on the table and let people make up their own minds. But I don't think there's any, we can't gain anything from having that sort of slagging each other off. What's it actually going to do?
Yeah.
And you know, it's I'm sure we'll see some more of his productions in the MAC again. We've had them in the past. So
Yeah.
I would just leave it at that.
Yeah.
You don't mind.
Well, I mean, I just wanted to commend you on the work
Thank you very
that
much.
do, and congratulations very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr Humphrey.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks very much for your presentation. I declare an interest as a governor of Edenbrook Primary School. You've been doing some work there, and actually I was there the night at Edenbrook Primary School. There was a gentleman from America who was over last year working with schools in North Belfast and West Belfast to teach them ballroom dancing, if you remember. And then he had the culmination of this was in the MAC, and and television was there and so on. But it was a big event that night, because also that night NI21 was launched in the MAC, and I thought that would be part of your presentation. But basically, could I just say, you know, I made comments in the autumn last year around the issue of disconnectivity, and that's, you know, this inquiry is part of the outworking of that, and I welcome it, and I welcome it for this reason. I got heavily criticised for those comments, but I stand by them, because it has allowed a discussion to be generated, and it has allowed people like yourselves to come along to this committee and give presentations and testimonies of the work you're doing. But I do have to say, and the work that you're doing is clearly very impressive in working with hard-to-reach communities. But I didn't know that, and I back the point someone else made earlier. A lot of people out there wouldn't have known it. So, you know, I think, you know, telling the story and letting people know what you're doing is something which, with all due respect, you perhaps need to look at to do that in a better way. I have also been in Spectrum Centres in my constituency, and I work closely with them. And I know that following those comments, the Decal family were told to reach out more into the community. So we've had the Ulster Orchestra who've been working out in the community and making connections with schools and with the Spectrum Centre itself, the Arts Council, the Planetarium. And I know, Kieran, you've been working with Mervyn Bell around some issue. Mervyn's in front of us next week. All of that I hugely welcome. But you were in the gallery when you heard the comments that were made by Roger Courtney about people not crossing the bridge. We've had situations, you know, in my part of the world where people talked about culture night. People won't go down to Shankill to go to culture night, and we've managed to get money for buses to go down and had some events in the Spectrum, so people came up from culture. Is there anything more we can do? And this is not a criticism, I'm just asking generally. Anything more we can do for events like Culture Night? Because obviously you're part of the reading here and you're part of the Cathedral Quarter Trust. Right. Is there more that we can do to reach out into those communities to get a bigger buy-in?
I think you're absolutely right about making, you know, greater connections with those communities, and that is absolutely an ongoing process for for us, I think it is about making connections with key organisations in those areas. I mean, our partnership with Belfast Interface Project is fantastic, and be able to make connections on the ground in communities. The partnership you talk about with the Spectrum Centre, I think is really important, because the model there is that they come to the MAC to learn skills and experience things that they then bring back to their own communities and can bear fruit there. So I think in terms of access, we have very low price community ticket rates for them to come to see work here, and transport assistance as well. But then also we talk about follow-on projects to that again can build capacity and skills within those communities. So I think it is about the relationships we have built and the relationships that we're seeking to build further in terms of making that connection. I think we're open a short amount of time, and to build really solid, worthwhile, meaningful connections takes time, takes a process.
And I think there's a capacity issue. You're very good for not saying, Kieran. I mean, because we just have one. Actually, we could do with a second, Kieran, and we'll have discussion with that. But that's what we need. It's actually hard to deliver much more with the limits of people. So we're going to have to look at capacity.
Yeah. I think the bottom line, William, is as you've recognised, it's a very complex issue, and it goes into all sorts of different areas around housing, education, employment. When areas are particularly poorly served in terms of the arts, they're poorly served in other ways too. So we recognise that as an arts centre, we have a real responsibility to be relevant to people at where they are in their lives, not where we think they should be, but where they actually are. So it happens in every time he drinks more tea than anybody else in this room, because the first thing we do whenever we eventually, after a whole series of meetings, get a community-based group to come into the MAC, to just sit down and have a cup of tea with them and have a conversation, which is about explaining to them and showing that the MAC belongs to them. The MAC belongs to the people of Belfast and Northern Ireland. They own it. They largely built it, and it drives everything we do. But it's a long-term process, and it's all about investment. The more money you put into this, the greater the fruits will bear.
Mm-hmm. Can I just say as well, we were obviously in very difficult economic times, and when politicians have to make decisions, invariably, it's the arts that will suffer, whether that's at council level or government level, and I think given the economic climate we're currently living in, complementarity is hugely important. In terms of whether it's money from council, money from the Arts Council, money from DCAL, is there? I think you made reference yourself that there's a bit of sometimes a disparate or disconnection within the sector. And I'm talking about Belfast because it's the only one that I know with any sort of detail. Is there more that can be done so that everybody works in a more collaborative way, in a complementary way, to ensure that we get a bigger bang for our buck?
We do. The impression you have received, very understandably, from recent events would suggest that the sector is a great deal more fractured than it is. It once was, it no longer is. Just in the MAC, we work in partnership with every producing company, every visual artist that's of note in Northern Ireland, and we work with every community-based organisation as much as we can who are interested in involving themselves in arts activity. We work with the other venues also. We tour our work to other parts of Northern Ireland in partnership with other venues. So I don't think things are not, you can take some comfort, things are nowhere near as bad and as fractured as you would think, given recent events.
Okay, thanks, Sharon. Can I just say, caramel squares are excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McGimsey.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks for the presentation. And can I congratulate you on the process that began many years ago in an old building and where you are today, and I think the achievement in getting the MAC to where it is and the sort of facility you have in no small measure down to your own personal effort over the years. And I also say that I have been impressed by what you're about, just on an issue that is Something I think is very important. You talk about, as part of one of your strategies, unlocking creativity. Now, how do you deal with that? How do you take that agenda into, for example, amongst young people in schools? Are schools receptive? How does that reach out? Tapping into young people's creativity, trying to get them to understand that everybody has within them that creativity, and how do you get there, and how do you support them, and how do you facilitate it?
And of course, you were so closely involved in the development of Unlocking Creativity, Michael, and I remember you and I had one of my first meetings with you when you were Culture Minister about this idea of a big arts centre in the centre of the city. Unlocking Creativity probably wasn't fully implemented because it was so difficult to implement. Cross-departmental working, as you know, is incredibly difficult to achieve. But it created a space, the process you led created a space in which extraordinary and really ambitious and exciting ideas saw the light of day. The fact is, in my experience, since 2002, the demands on teachers within schools have increased significantly. So the schools that we connect with, the schools who come to the MAC, do so on the back of really deeply committed teachers who understand and value how their teaching to the children is going to be enhanced through cultural participation at the same time. I think this is too big a nut for any one department, any one organisation to crack. I think if there was some way in which it could be recontextualised for 2014, because all the opportunities that were identified in Unlocking Creativity still hold true. Children are every bit as creative now as they were then. But teachers are slammed. Teachers who are delivering the national curriculum, not only are their schools stripped of budgets, but they find it so difficult to carve out space for anything that is not directly focused on the delivery of the curriculum. So if there was anything the CAL committee could do in order to create a space, provide some kind of opportunity to see are there 6 things we could do out of Unlocking Creativity that would make a real difference really quickly? Because I don't know anybody in the arts sector who doesn't think that Unlocking Creativity was a brilliant policy initiative. Really great thinking went into it. And I don't think that there's a huge amount of need to revisit it, to start again.
The deal was, of course, the 4 departments, ECAL, DETI, DE and Dale.
That's right.
And the problem was always getting them all to gel together. We seem to now have stepped that forward into purely a DETI initiative, which is employment in the creative sector, rather than the actual genesis is where we meant to be, and jobs are a consequence, not the actual gain.
Yeah.
So and you reckon 6 steps in. So I'm giving you 1. What's the next one?
Well, what about 3? I always go, we don't appraise our staff in the MAC over 12 months, we do it over 6 months, because it's very hard to hold your attention for anything more than that sort of time. So let's go for 3 within 6 months. I think if you could getting those people around the table again would be a great a success. Is that 2?
Well,
let's get together.
I'm asking you to be creative here,
I need time.
No, I know.
To be creative.
I know. Okay, thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Ms McKevitt.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks very much for your presentation. It's very enjoyable. And I suppose you have what in the MAC what a lot of us would love to see in our own city. Our towns, and we're all very jealous of it. It's a fantastic building. I've been many a time, and I'm sure I'm in the figures of that 70,000 with the cups of tea. I haven't tried the Carmel Squares yet, but I need to go back. There you go. A wee bit of marketing there in the CAL committee, and we're already sold on the Carmel Squares. A lot has been talked about, and I'm looking at your week commencing the 2nd of June, or the week that commenced 2nd of June, and what all was on the diary and Bourbon Inn, and it seems to me that it's a very busy place, and it seems to be quite open, particularly with your family room and also the common room, and it's great to see that young ones are coming in and using it even for their homework club, etc. And that to me is the beginning of maybe that shared space that has been talked about here in the Assembly, and delivering on that. And I think there's the open doors there, maybe for the MAC to be able to take a lead of some kind, and being creative around that shared space. I mean, like there's children, I'm sure, attending that homework club that maybe would never have gone in and looked at a show or a performance of some kind, or so there's doors open there for introduction for the first time to the arts. But I mean, your presentation was excellent, and a lot has talked about the lack of marketing, or maybe the lack of knowledge on what you deliver on, and you have sort of maybe touched and agreed that could have maybe been worked to be a bit better. And success sometimes can get lost in transit. So it's up to you to sell your own brand in the MAC, and that's something that I would try and encourage. But you spoke about the Lighthouse programme and the photography and all of that, and it was how you stay with young adults with learning disabilities and what you supply to them and offer to them, and mental health issues in men and maybe women as well. And that's triggered something to me. Have you used any communication with the statutory health bodies at all around delivery of the arts and what health benefits that could have?
We have done some work around that area. We've spoken to some of the health partnerships around Belfast in particular about providing services for senior citizens, and we're currently putting together a programme to involve older people in the building. So we have made some steps towards that, and that's the extent of my knowledge of my time.
But that goes to one of the recommendations that Len mentioned. That's the whole idea behind the model of good practice that we mentioned in Lancaster, because there they've sewn it all together. They've got health, education, employment issues, housing and arts, all as part of service level agreements. So, nobody thinks, certainly nobody in the MAC thinks that all the woes, all the difficulties that we experience in Northern Ireland can be solved by a few arts workshops. On the other hand, if you're going to think about an holistic approach to some of the most disadvantaged members of our community, it would be so much more effective and long term if you thought about them and their needs in the round. And part of that would certainly be a lifeline, a sort of cultural engagement. But it would also be around other issues, as I'd mentioned, such as housing, employment, their health, and other social services. So we would love to work in that way, but that feels to me like a very strategic shift that one arts organisation probably doesn't have the space. We're probably not ideally located to do that. But if there was any way in which the CAL committee thought there were some practical ideas in which we could move that agenda forward for the whole arts sector and for the whole sector of strategy providers, we would very much like a place at that table.
Yeah, and that'd be very welcome.
I suppose a part of it, if you need a reassurance in that, we specifically work with partners that have a skill set to deal with mental health issues, to improve young people's employability. The Now Project are fantastic at that. The Lighthouse opposite offer counselling services for the members that they're dealing with. So, working in partnerships with organisations that have a great skill set outside of what the skill set that the MAC has itself is really important in delivering a really holistic service to the individuals that we work with.
Yeah, no, it's just your presentation was very flowing, and you slipped into the conversation, Anne, where you had a group of vulnerable adults, young adults that began and they first met, and now they're coming every day. Do you know what I mean? So you obviously have the social skills to make them comfortable to come in, and you have all that, but we're not hearing about that to be able to. Do you know what I mean? So come back to the market, and then I just think you have to invest, and you talked about your long-term investment, and I think it's time to introduce the market and end of that. You are busy. What could you achieve if that marketing went up a wee bit more? So, but thanks very much and congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hilditch.
Thanks, Chair. And it really was something in the same vein in relation to good practice examples that you've learned of in other places, and you did mention during the presentation about Lancashire. I know you further maybe developed it there. But it was just, is there anything that we should be looking at in other areas that you have come across in relation to something that we could bring back, adopt, or look at for Northern Ireland? And Lancashire seems to be the perfect type of...
Do you know, great things happen in places where there is belief, where people genuinely value whatever it is, whether it's sport or art or music. It is driven by people in your position. You're the ones who set the agenda. The rest of us follow behind. That's one way of doing it. If there's anything, I mean, I'm going to throw it back at you, and I know that's maybe not satisfactory, but the MAC couldn't help but raise your spirits. If there's any, I mean, I know the CAL committee has already met in the MAC, but I would be more than happy for the MAC to be used as a resource in whatever way, whether it was to inform or to inspire. A series of thinking exercises about, and you're quite right, William's totally right, we are looking into such a serious public funding environment. I fully appreciate that. But if we are going to preserve and allow to continue to grow the great investment that's been made already in Belfast and Northern Ireland, then we've got to find a way to really put some, turn up the pilot light so that the creativity that is in Northern Ireland is allowed to really shine.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Can I again thank you very much for your time and for the amount of detail which you presented to us today, and I wish you well in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
At where? Killings, yeah. It was such a good
Just following on from that presentation, we members be content if we write to the Health Minister just to get a sense of the amount of engagement that each of the trusts would have with arts venues and community groups across each of the trusts. Okay, thank you. Yep. And moving then to matters arising, correspondence tracker is at page 152, detailing outstanding correspondence. At 153, we have a copy of a letter to DCAL from the Committee for Regional Development regarding their inquiry into the benefits of cycling. The committee has asked DCAL how much of its planned £25 million capital investment in sport is allocated to cycling. The response, once received, will be considered in a future meeting, so if members are content that we note this. Page 155 is an explanatory memorandum on European Film Forum. Members are content that we forward the report to the Minister and to Northern Ireland Screen, just to bring it to their attention and to ask for their comments. Again, if you're content, we do that. 173 is correspondence from the House of the Oireachtas. Are members content that we forward this letter to the Department? Comment, and also then to respond to the Joint Committee just to tell them that what action we've taken. Thank you. With regards to Chairperson's business, I don't have anything formal, but just to reflect on last week at our visit, we met up with representatives of the Milk Cup, and they had highlighted they have a business plan which would extend that scheme to a fortnight, but there seems to be some challenges for them with regards to funding. Members will be content that we write to both the Culture, Arts and Leisure Minister and also to the Eddie Minister.
That's important, Chair, but I think also I asked Carol at question time recently, specifically about the Milk Cup. I got a very positive and a very good response. I think you should have a look at that and answer it. And effectively, she was saying that she would ensure that the Milk Cup would prosper, and if it needed funds, it would get it.
Yes, and that was raised by Mr. Irwin on Tuesday, but I'm not sure actually that's and I filtered down to the group themselves, and I'm not sure really what funding is being made available directly from DCAL. I know there's money has gone from the Tourist Board, but it might be useful just to get on record really.
The key thing is how much do they want, or how much have they asked for, or how much do they need? They have to tell you that.
We need. I think we just maybe need to get just more information in and around that, Mr. Humphrey.
Chair, the working dinner we had with them and others was very useful. I think one of the things they mentioned, speaking to Victor, was that they were looking at perhaps if the funding was available, the resource, because obviously there's one part-time member of staff for the Milk Cup, which is incredible, and you consider what they actually deliver. is they're also looking at ladies football, but they can't possibly look at that unless they have extra resource. And when you think of the good publicity that gets Northern Ireland and the financial advantage it provides for the North Coast in terms of every hotel, in all of those hotel room, in all of those seaside resorts benefiting from that hugely, it's a no-brainer that this should get more support. And it gets a fraction of the support from government that other sporting events do. And really, I think it's something that needs to be looked at across government. And I detected honeyed words the other day, but no money.
I think we also have to highlight, this is a festival of football, but also the good examples that gives to young people right across Northern Ireland, and the opportunities that it creates. Mr. Hilditch.
Thanks, Chair. I know I've spoken to you about this in the past, and it's on William's point about the development of the ladies or girls section of the Milk Cup and what could be achieved. There is partial resource there by people who are friendly to that development of the ladies' game, and I think it's something we don't want to lose sight of and support and push as well as a committee.
Just on that vein, can I promote that Northern Ireland ladies are playing Scotland this evening at Solitude? If members are interested and wish to attend, I'm sure their presence will be welcomed. Okay, thank you for that. Moving then to the forward work programme at page 177. The only change to the programme is the fact that Cultureland will no longer be able to brief us next week, and we hope to reschedule that for September. There were issues for them for one of the organisers personally in regard to that. Is there any other business for members? Mr. McMillan?
Chair, could we consider maybe sometime using the new Giants Causeway Centre as a venue for a meeting?
Yeah, I think that has been that's there for to be considered.
Next week.
Okay. The date and the time of the next meeting is sorry.
A couple of the issues to Commonwealth Games pattern. Who was responsible for the organisation?
That was the committee themselves.
The Commonwealth
Northern Ireland Committee.
Yeah, got some complaints about in relation to trying to contact them in relation to what was going on from members of the public, and nobody could get any information. Nobody responded to telephone calls, and indeed nobody responded to emails up until yesterday in relation to it. I was just wondering who are they answerable to, or can we get a response from them as to why there seems to be poor PR, marketing and communication, and equally so in the Circuit of Ireland. Another person got in touch with me yesterday in relation to criticism there where there was nothing on their website in relation to where the routes was. When they phoned up, they asked about it. They were advised to purchase a programme, and that was the end of it, which was really poor again. And we're trying to get the members of the public in Northern Ireland to buy into these events. I just wondered if we had any connections with any of these organisations just to find out why they're acting like that.
Okay, well, I think that if members are content, we can follow that up appropriately. The next committee meeting is 10 a.m. in this room next Thursday, the 26th of June, and we'll be hearing from New Lodge Arts and the Spectrum Centre on our inquiry. So if members are content, the committee is adjourned.
Is the Northern Ireland Assembly